I'm 74 years old. For 45 of those years, my hands built things that were meant to outlast me. I believed in the blueprint. They tell you to work hard, follow the rules, and pay off your debts. They tell you that if you own your home, you finally won the game. That no one can ever take it from you. They're lying. For 20 years, the deed to my house hung on my wall, framed like a diploma. It was my proof that I had built something permanent, something safe. But that piece of paper wasn't a title. It was just a rental agreement with a 45-year lease. And the shame of losing it wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the soul-crushing realization that I had spent my one life worshipping a false idol made of wood and nails. If you have ever felt that cold fear, the kind where the very thing you sacrificed everything for begins to feel like a cage, leave a comment below and just say, "I'm here." This isn't just my story. It's a confession. Pull up a chair to this table and subscribe. We need to talk about the things we're not supposed to say out loud. You know, for 45 years, my hands built things for other people. Houses, office buildings, things meant to outlast a man. I thought I understood the physics of it all. You follow the blueprint, you lay a true foundation, and you earn your peace of quiet. My regret isn't the work. It's that I believed the finish line was something you could own. I thought that when I owned my home outright, it meant I was safe, that I had won. Now I see I was just a caretaker for a place that was never really mine to begin with. The silence in this house used to be a comfort. Now it's just a reminder of the echo. That particular morning, the silence was heavier than usual. It was a cold quiet, the kind that gets under your skin. I was sitting at the kitchen table where my wife Martha and I used to drink our coffee. But I wasn't drinking coffee. I was just staring at a piece of paper. An official notice with a red stamp on it. It looked angry, that stamp, like it was shouting from the page. I didn't have to read the words. I knew what they meant. It felt like the final word in a long argument I didn't know I was having. A tightness started in my chest. Not a pain, not yet. Just a squeeze, like a fist closing around my heart. I tried to take a deep breath, but the air felt thin, useless. My eyes drifted past the angry red stamp, out the window to the back garden. The old oak tree stood there, same as ever, and for a second, I wasn't a 74-year-old man staring at a bill. I was 40 again. I could feel the warm sun on my back, the rough grip of the ladder in my hams. I was cleaning out the gutters, a job I always found satisfying. The earthy, damp smell of old leaves, the scrape of my little trowel against the aluminum. I remember looking down at the world I'd built. This little patch of green, Martha's roses blooming against the fence, and thinking, this is it. This is all I ever wanted. A man who cleans his own gutters on a house he owns. He's a man who has won the game. That feeling was so real, so solid, like the hammer in my hand. It was a feeling of pure contentment. But sitting there at the table, the memory just made the fist in my chest squeeze tighter. The king was gone. Only an old man in a cold kitchen remained. I pushed myself up from the chair, needing to move. The room tilted and the squeeze became a sharp, hot nail right in the center. I stumbled into the hall, gripping the doorframe to steady myself. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic trapped bird, and my eyes landed on it. The title of freehold. It hung there just where we'd placed it all those years ago. Martha had insisted on a real oak frame. "A document like this deserves respect, Thomas," she'd said. I can still hear the single, solid thump of the hammer as I drove the nail into the wall. I can still feel her hand on my arm, her palm warm and dusted with flour. "There," she whispered, like it was a prayer. "A wall against the world. We're safe now. Forever." Forever. Standing there in the hall, that word was a mockery. The wall was just plaster. The fortress was just wood and nails. The pain flared, a white-hot wave that stole my breath and radiated down my left arm. I knew what this was. You see it on safety posters. You hear the stories. But you never think it's your story. Not in your own hall. Not in the fortress you built with your own two hands. My hand, the one that had held hammers and framed titles, slid down the doorframe. My knuckles were white, but there was no strength in them. I looked at my reflection in the glass over the title, a pale, sweating, frightened old man. An old fool who thought his treasure was something he could hang on a wall. The house wasn't a home in that moment. It was a tomb, a box made of fading memories. My knees gave way. It wasn't a crash. It was more like a slow, tired surrender. The floorboards rose up to meet me, and the last earthly thing I was aware of was the pattern of the wood grain, so familiar and close to my face. The sound in my ears wasn't my own gasp or the humming of the refrigerator. It was just a quiet echo. Thump. A wall against the world. And then the light from the window, the dust motes, everything, it all just folded into darkness. The darkness, it wasn't an emptiness. That's the first thing I understood. It wasn't a closing of the eyes. It was more like a folding. Like the world I knew, the wood grain on the floor, the dust motes in the light from the window, it all just gently folded in on itself. The pain in my chest, that hot nail, it didn't fade. It was simply left behind. One moment it was my entire world. The next, it was a noise in another room. A room whose door had just been closed. I was no longer inside the pain. I was outside of it. There was no sense of rising, not at first. Just a separating. I was aware of the hallway. I was aware of the house. And I was aware of a body, an old man's body lying on the floor. My body. But the connection was severed. It was like looking at a photograph of a stranger you vaguely pitied. I could see the sweat on his brow, the fear still etched around his eyes. I could see the title of freehold on the wall behind him, the glass catching the light. And I felt nothing. Not sadness, not regret. The shame that I had carried like a bag of rocks for so long, it was gone. The house itself, the home I had poured my life into, the place that had become a hungry mouth, it had no hold on me. It was just a box of wood and plaster filled with echoes. I turned from it, and it cost me nothing. You see, where I was, there was no direction, no up or down. There was only forward, and forward was into a light. Now, when I say light, you're thinking of the sun. You're thinking of a lamp in a dark room. This wasn't like that. This light was a substance. It was more like water than air. You were in it, and it was in you. It had a warmth that wasn't a temperature, but a knowing. It was the feeling of Martha's hand on my arm. It was the feeling of my son's embrace when he was a boy. It was every moment of pure, undeserved grace I had ever known, and it was all happening at once. The weight of 74 years, the aching back, the weary bones, the constant low-grade hum of anxiety about bills and what the neighbors thought. It all just dissolved. I wasn't a body anymore. I was just me. The me that had been there all along, underneath the calloused hands and the worried frown. There was a silence here, too. But it wasn't the cold, empty silence of the house. This silence was full. It was a listening silence. It was the quiet of a cathedral, not because it was empty, but because it was so full of a presence that no one dared to speak. And in the center of that light, in the heart of that silence, the presence grew stronger. It wasn't something I saw with my eyes. You don't see this. You feel it. It was a love so profound, so absolute, it was almost terrifying. It knew every secret I had ever kept. It knew the lie I told my son on the phone. It knew the rage I felt in the hallway. It knew the foolish pride I had in a piece of paper in a frame. It knew me completely, every ugly and broken part. And the knowing wasn't an accusation. It was an embrace. It was a love that didn't excuse the brokenness, but held it, and in holding it, made it whole. I had spent my whole life trying to build a wall against the world, to prove I was worthy. And here, in this place, worthiness wasn't part of the equation. I was simply held, and I felt a joy so clean, so pure. It was like weeping and laughing at the same time. All my life I had been talking, arguing with God, bargaining with Him, complaining to Him, thanking Him. My prayers were always me talking into the void. But here, the talking stopped. I just listened. I stood in the heart of that loving silence, unburdened and known. And then a voice spoke. It wasn't a sound that entered my ears. It was a thought that bloomed in my soul. a voice that was more familiar to me than my own. It didn't boom, it didn't thunder. It just asked a simple, gentle question that rearranged everything I had ever been. It said, "Thomas, was it worth it? Was it worth it?" The question hung in that perfect, loving silence. And my whole life, all 74 years of it, rushed to answer. Not as a series of pictures, not like a film, more like a feeling, a weight. I felt the weight of every hour of overtime I had worked. I felt the calluses on my hands, the ache in my back, the worry in my gut over every single mortgage payment. I felt the pride swelling in my chest as I hung that title on the wall. And I felt the decades of anxiety that followed, the constant fear of losing it, the shame of not being able to keep it. The 45 years I spent building, protecting, and finally losing that house. It all coalesced into a single heavy stone in my soul. And I knew the answer. Before I could even form the thought, the truth of it was just there. No, it wasn't worth it. None of it. And in that moment of knowing, the light showed me not my life, but the meaning of it. The lens shifted. I saw myself at the bank handing over that final check. The proudest moment of my life, I'd always thought. But from here, from inside this love, it looked small, pitiful. A man trading his life for a pile of papers. Then the light showed me something else. Martha, years earlier, laughing in the kitchen. She had flour on her nose and was trying to wipe it away with the back of her hand, making the smudge worse. I remembered reaching over and gently wiping it off for her, a moment that was forgotten as soon as it passed. But here, in this place, that single throwaway moment of tenderness had more weight, more substance than the entire 45 years of my work. That one moment was real. The title deed was a ghost. I saw my son, maybe 6 years old, running to me when I got home from the job site. He smelled of grass and sunshine, and his hug was so fierce it almost knocked me over. I had been so tired that day, so preoccupied with a problem at work. But I saw that hug from this new place, and I understood. That was the treasure. That was the kingdom. Not the house, not the land, not the deed in the frame. The love that happened inside the walls. That was the only thing that had any reality here. My whole life I had been guarding the bucket, polishing the bucket, terrified of losing the bucket. And I had almost missed the water. The water was the whole point. The house, the money, the pride. It was all just a bucket, and a leaky one at that. I saw it all with a clarity that was both heartbreaking and unspeakably joyous. The shame wasn't in losing the house. The shame was in worshiping it in the first place. I felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it was like a current pulling me deeper into the light. Thank you. Thank you for showing me. It was the only prayer that mattered now. I was ready. I was home. I felt the letting go in every part of my being. There was nothing left to fight for, nothing left to prove. I was known and I was loved, and that was enough. I surrendered to the warmth, to the peace. But then the voice, that same gentle, all-knowing presence, bloomed in my soul once more. It wasn't a command. It was a statement of fact, filled with an infinite tenderness. This is not your time, Thomas. The lesson is not for you alone. A new feeling arose. Not a command from the outside, but a purpose from within. The knowledge settled into me. I had to go back. It wasn't a punishment, it was a mission. I had to go back and tell the story. Not just the story of losing a house, but the story of finding what mattered. I had to go back to that old broken body on the floor. Your work is not finished, the voice affirmed, not as a foreman giving an order, but as a father explaining a purpose. You spent your life building walls of wood and stone. Now you must learn to build bridges of truth. Go, and be not afraid. I didn't want to. I wanted to stay in this love, in this light, forever. But the purpose was now a part of me. The love wasn't leaving me, it was sending me. The brilliant living warmth began to recede. The perfect listening silence began to fade. And I felt a pull, a terrible, heavy pull backward, back toward the echoes, back toward the cold, back toward the nail, the hot, sharp nail of pain waiting for me in the dark. The pull, it was like being dragged downward through thick, cold water. The loving warmth, that beautiful light, it didn't vanish. It was simply behind me, growing more distant with every heartbeat. And the pain, oh, the pain was waiting. It didn't creep back in. It slammed into me. The hot nail was in my chest again, but this time it was 100 times worse, because now I knew what it felt like to be without it. I was being forced back into a burning building I had just escaped. The first sound was a beep, annoying, steady, insistent. Beep, beep, beep. It was the metronome of this world, I thought, the rhythm of the cage. Then came the smells, antiseptic, bleach, the faint, sickly sweet scent of sickness. I was aware of a great weight on my body, not just my own weight, but the gravity of everything. The heavy blanket, the ache in my bones, the crushing weight of air itself. I tried to take a breath and choked on something. A tube. There was a tube down my throat. My eyes fluttered open. I saw white, water-stained ceiling tile. A universe of cracks and shadows. I was back. For a few days, I just drifted. The world came to me in fragments. A nurse's kind face swimming above me. The scratchy feel of the hospital sheets. The taste of ice chips melting on my tongue. My children were there, their faces etched with worry. They'd hold my hand, their hands so warm and alive, and they would talk about doctors and procedures and second chances. They thought I had been given a second chance at life. They didn't understand. I had been given a second chance at death. A chance to do it right this time. They saw a frail old man snatched from the jaws of death. But I knew the truth. I had been gently turned away at the gates of home and told to go back and finish my work. The fear I saw in their eyes, it was a stranger to me now. That fear had been left behind on the floor of the hallway, next to the ghost of a man who worshipped a piece of paper. When they finally took the tube out, my first words were just a whisper. "It's all right." My daughter started to cry, thinking I was just being brave. But it was the truest thing I had ever said. It was all right. All of it. The pain, the hospital, the lost house, the years of foolish pride. It was all part of a story that was so much bigger than I had ever imagined. The doctors would come in, these serious young men, and show me charts. They'd talk about my heart as if it were a faulty engine they had managed to patch up. I'd nod and listen, but I wasn't really there. I was listening to the silence, that full, loving silence. I found I could still feel it if I got quiet enough. It was like a radio station from a distant country, faint but always there. The love I felt in that light, it hadn't stayed there. It had sent back an ambassador, a little piece of it that now lives right here, in the center of my chest, next to all the scars. And that is why I am talking to you now. You who are sitting there, listening to an old man's ramblings. You see, the lesson wasn't just for me. My work, the voice said, was not finished. For 45 years I built walls of stone. Now I have to build bridges of truth. This is that bridge. From me to you. Do you understand? The things of this world, your job, your house, your savings, your pride, they are all just buckets. They are tools meant to carry the water. But it's the water that gives life, the love, the kindness. The moment you wipe a tear from a cheek, the moment you hug your child, that is the water. Don't spend your life polishing the bucket, please. Don't make my mistake. Whatever you are carrying, whatever burden or secret shame you hold, it has no weight in that place. It's all left behind. The only thing you take with you is the love you gave away. The only treasure that survives is the treasure you poured into others. I still have the framed title. It sits on my dresser in this little room. The lien notice is still taped across it, a reminder, not of what I lost, but of what I found when I lost it all. I no longer fear the end of the road. It's not an end. It's a bend in the road that you cannot see from here. It's a doorway, not a wall. And on the other side of that door is a love that knows you completely and is waiting. Just waiting. So go. Finish your work. Build your bridges. And be not afraid.